I'm Jeremy, and I'm going to tell you today why I chose to walk away from the Democratic Party and from the left. Now, I'm still technically a classical liberal in my leanings in many ways. However, I have evolved and developed exponentially. And most of that is just as a consequence of thinking critically for the first time about a lot of the things that I've had, like preconceived assumptions, and also, of course, watching other people's development and seeing the progression that has happened with so many other people through the walkaway campaign. So super, super excited to see this campaign uh, reach its potential and to get the truth out to people. So I was a progressive, a socialist, and I didn't even understand what that really meant. I had assumptions about what it meant, but I never checked to make sure those assumptions were correct. I grew up in a very poor rural community in Virginia, in southwestern Virginia, and I had been given this kind of dualistic explanation of the political system and the political parties, that the left was the underdog championing women's rights, gay rights, civil liberties, that they were for the working class and the ordinary people who had been oppressed by the right, which was comprised of affluent billionaires sitting atop their ivory towers, Fortune 500 companies. And so there's a whole lot of assumption baked into that right from the get go. It is basically assuming that the left fights against racism and the right is racist, that the left must oppose. And I went through a period in my life where I was heavily drawn into the human hell that is addiction. I was addicted to heroin and to meth for almost 8 years of my adult life. And I have to credit a lot of that time as being kind of the snowballing effect of terrible ideas starting to stick to me. Of course, in such a chemically dependent state and in such a heavily intoxicated lifestyle, we cannot think critically at all. We do not see reality as it is. So it's and this is something that's very important to me because whenever I found recovery, there was for the first time an opening where I had to go back and assess all these things that I had let stick to me on the process through addiction into recovery. I was left with all kinds of assumptions about the world and about the political system and my place within it that ended up to just be palpably false. And a lot of that, a lot of working that out just was the result of, for the first time, being in sobriety to think critically. And, a lot of the ideas that I held were extremely detrimental to not just like my mental and emotional well being, but to the people around me because they made me miserable. The way that I saw the world in this victim mentality where I was oppressed and the system was too big to fight. All of these things were a tool I now see of fear and control that are used against the people. And the left are completely unhinged and out of control at this point. All of the things that at once attracted me to them have the curtain has been drawn back and the contents of these ideas is now revealed. I didn't understand what Marxism was. I had only ever been introduced to arguments that ignored all of the skeletons in the closets. Um, so I started to do some digging. I got really interested in history, and along the way, I began to realize everything I had been taught was a complete and total lie about the political system and the political parties. The left had been the party of slavery and the party of the Ku Klux Klan literally forever. The left had always been the party of racism and slavery. Now, I know a lot of people out there are going to say, but wait, there was a big switch. The parties switched values. And no, they didn't. That's not true either. And I know for certain that is not true. It's not hard to figure this out. All you have to do is go back to the period of the Civil Rights Act. And of course, before, so there was the Dixiecrat Party of the Democratic South that were what we would consider the super racist arm of the Democratic Party, which should not be correlated to the entire party, but that was a heavily influential and intrinsically connected part of the Democratic Party. Okay, the right now, just because the right went through a period of attracting certain ex-racist people in Congress and in public life, there were instances where Strom Thurmond, for instance, is the only one that comes to mind, was a devout racist who had a change of heart and switched parties. Okay, they used that to say this big switch happened where all the racists went over there, so all the non-racist people moved over here, and it's just a total myth. It's a lie. You can go and look for yourself. There was no big switch. It is a little bit complicated, and some of the better scholars to look into this would be like Dinesh D'Souza, who has done incredible work explaining the nuance of how the big switch myth was perpetuated. And I think there's a whole lot of reason to assume that the Democratic Party, which was literally platformed on slavery and then segregation, that then opposed the Civil Rights Act. The Civil Rights Act got more support in both the House and the Senate by Republicans. So, it is a lie, and it is an absolutely offensive lie that the left is out here championing for women and gay people and black people when they were in fact always the party of racism and segregation. So coming upon information like that really made me question, like, wow, what else do I not understand, and how did I pick up all of these assumptions? Why am I so wrong about this stuff? Most people don't like to realize their entire life they were under completely false assumptions that made my worldview incompatible with reality. And the left doesn't really care about black people and gay people. It uses them like pawns on a chessboard. Their ultimate goal is total authority to be given to the state under their control, mind you. They don't want to unhinge the system and break the balances of power so that when they lose an election, the right gets that power. No. What they are attempting to do is to bring in socialism. And, a lot of people on the left are probably going to hear that and think it's a baseless claim. But if there are moderate leftists out there, God help you, because you're really an island in that party now. It has become the most radical, absolutely grotesque, inhumane political party ever devised in the Western world. The left is standing for things that are just completely inhumane, like partial birth abortion, legal now in 7 states. Pro-choice, okay. I was pro-choice for a very long time. And I had, like many people, been told that a woman's right to choose to have a baby or not was essential. That they're having control of their reproductive function was a human right. That sounds okay when you leave out the part about a human baby, 9 months old, woman in dilation, having its skull cut open with a scalpel and its brain sucked out through a tube. Okay? I don't have a human right to kill a baby. A woman does not have a human right to kill a baby. You can disagree with me. That's fine. I find it grotesque. I think it's disgusting. The greatest single factor, not only to my recovery, but to my political awakening, was becoming a father. Becoming a father that really it fundamentally transformed everything about me. It infused my life with purpose where there once was absence of purpose. It gave me meaning I could have only fathomed in my wildest dreams could be possible. With that responsibility and with a newly found sobriety and a life infused with meaning, I began to think extremely critically about the issues at hand in the world. I became interested in public life. I became interested in politics because for the first time, I had something to protect in the future. I saw there was a world my children were going to inherit that I would no longer be here to protect them from. And I became extremely interested in what that world was going to look like, what it would be made of, and what direction we would be going in. Environmentalism and humanitarianism is championed by the left, when in fact a lot of the modern environmental arguments are anti human arguments. They are presuming that it's better to destroy tens, if not hundreds of millions of families' sources of income in order to prevent climate change. And the basic science, there's a lot of dispute. You know, the left acts like it's a total consensus that this is the way it is. We are in the day after tomorrow, and the world is going to catch on fire and floods everywhere. The reality is, if we stopped all carbon emissions today around the entire world, if we cut off all carbon emissions, you're talking about no cars, no businesses, no electricity, no factories, no energy production, nothing. No cows, no people breathing. If we changed all of that today, then in 100 years, the consequence of this insane reduction of CO2 emission, the consequence would only change the global temperature by 0.07 degrees. Excuse me, 0.17 degrees. Okay? It's not 1.7, it's not 17, it's 0.17 degrees. Okay? The idea that we are going to fix, which I don't contest, there is climate change. Now, I would heavily contest, but leave it to scientists to dispute what can possibly be done about it and what the true effects of it are going to be. This is, to me, not solved yet, and I have a lot more research and learning to do about this, for sure. I am trying to participate and do my due diligence on this subject, but what I can tell you is the most intelligent arguments I've heard in the arena of climate change is that poor people don't care about climate change. People in poverty don't have the luxury of being concerned about the state of a world they will not be alive in 150 or 200 years from now. If we bring more people out of poverty, if that is the focus, it would eventually produce a more concerned population. Until we can solve the immediate crises that we are living in, which is the wealth inequality, then I don't think it's going to be possible to solve the issue. You're certainly not going to, at what cost are we willing to solve this issue? Do you really want to destroy tens of millions of families? You can't, and it's just like the same thing with automation, with replacing all truck driving jobs. This is something that, the left is championing. Basically, from what I can tell, the left has this plan to create a permanent underclass of Democratic voters through an expansion of the welfare state. Basically, their solution is, we're going to eliminate vast swaths of the population's ability to earn an income by destroying those jobs in the name of green energy, and we are going to create a universal basic income program that supplements, their once $75,000 a year paying salary. We're going to give them $1,000 a month, and their wife $1,000 a month, and they'll be okay. They'll survive. It's a terrible idea. It's the dumbest idea I've ever heard. I mean, I've heard some dumb ideas, but that really takes the cake on how to solve environmental problems. I don't know how to solve those problems, but what I do know is we have immediate problems that are currently crippling a huge majority of the population. We have problems with poverty, and we have problems with income distribution. We have all kinds of problems with economics, basic economics, that I feel if we tackled and if we could solve those, if we could have a revival of the family, this is the main issue in my opinion that is facing our world, is there is an increasing and alarming trend of parent absence, and specifically of father absence. We have created a system where a father has a very lopsided balance of power distribution, where a woman and a man that are not married and have no intention of being married, they have casual sex, the woman gets pregnant, and the woman now has full authority completely over this situation. A man is told, wanting to have an opinion about whether that woman carries the child to term or not, that is bigotry, that it is a war against women. Okay? So the man has no say there, and then the child is born. The woman, at all times, can throw the man away or trade him in for something more shiny, and the man is entitled to financially support the child until it comes of age. It is entitled to pay insurance, and it's a really stupid system, because what it does is it allows men to abandon their children and their moral and financial responsibilities. It allows people to abandon their family, and in many ways incentivizes it. A woman will receive, a single mother will receive far more in welfare benefits if there is not a father in the family. It incentivizes the destruction of the nuclear family, quite simply. And this seems to be a catastrophic effect the left has had on our society. It is destroying the family, and it has just become completely unhinged. If you can't see it, you're not looking, or you don't want to see it. If you can't see what is happening. Now, I have a lot of complaints about the right. I am not exactly a conservative by any stretch of the imagination. While I am far more comfortable supporting conservatism, especially in the current political climate, I am not a staunch conservative, though I am starting to lean more in that direction than ever before. I'm pro-life. I completely reject Marxism. Now that I understand what it is and what it's done, I do still support same-sex marriage, but that's a whole nother topic. It's not just a stamp of approval and nothing else. It's had negative effects on the family as well, but ultimately, I support the maximum amount of freedoms for the maximum amount of groups of people. You know, so I guess I'm a libertarian. I'm like a right-leaning libertarian, and that is quite an evolution from a progressive radical leftist. And I really just want to take a moment to say I think there is a huge correlation. We live in a sex and drug worshiping culture. And the left is definitely the the political party that is pushing this culture and is promoting it. They are promoting radical promiscuity, radical feminism and critical race theory, some of the most ridiculous garbage, some of the worst ideas ever created. And we have created some very terrible ideas as a species. We have created ideas that have led to the intentional murder of hundreds of millions of human beings. So I don't say it lightly. I think these ideas are just as bad as that. I don't think that the consequences of that have came to fruition, but if we continue to play with this type of fire, it will come to fruition. What we are doing is we are playing into the most vile and evil parts of humanity, which is tribalism. We have a natural tendency all the way down to the bacterial level of species. There is a natural inclination for groups, tribal identity groups, to come together and oppose one another. And this is a problem. This is a serious problem that is very well going to lead to civil war if there is not an awakening. It is time for another enlightenment period, or we will bomb ourselves back into the Stone Age, if not literally socially. So, there's a whole lot of things that I am yet to understand and I'm still exploring. But what I do know now is I do not support the Democratic Party. I do not in any way think that I had the slightest grasp about what I was thinking or talking about until very recently when I started to challenge myself to back up the ideas that I had let people and culture and media program into me. And I highly encourage you to do the same. We all have assumptions and ideas that need to be analyzed, that need to be rigorously examined, put under a microscope, because they don't just influence our lives, they influence the entire world. And it should be no surprise to anybody at this point living in the West that we are a lot of people call it a culture war. A lot of people call it a coming civil war. There is a reason to make that assertion. However, I would say we are in a war of ideas, predominantly. This is what is reigning over and influencing the culture war, is what is pushing us to civil war. Your ideas can be the most valuable or invaluable contributions to society. So look at them. Understand what you're talking about. And if you don't, learn. Don't use your voice to be another microphone or amplifier for the mainstream narrative, which is all over social media. And this is to the right and the left. Think independently. Think for yourself. Do not just don't copy and paste what the status quo is saying. And that's tricky because a lot of people think they are having independent and unique ideas and perspectives, and they're not. They are absorbing a kind of cultural consensus through what they observe and what they put their time and energy into, specifically in social media and in social groups. And there is a lot of built-in assumptions most people don't even realize are there. And it's dangerous. And it's crazy that we are acting as these sponges for misinformation. So that's my walk-away testimony. That is why I walked away from the Democratic Party, and I highly encourage you to do the same and to vote for Donald Trump come this November. He's not a perfect person. he is not a perfect candidate. I went back and watched the Kennedy and Nixon debates after the first presidential debate, and it really bothered me. I felt hurt in some way that this is the current political climate that we are inheriting because we are a great country. We have produced some of the finest people and some of the finest ideas the world has ever known. And we deserve to be better than what we are. I have my complaints and my gripes with the President of the United States, but ultimately, I'm thankful for him. I'm thankful for the way that he has shaken up the political system. Now, I can't say it's all been positive, but it was a much needed return to values, the core values of the American way of life: free market economics, deregulation, letting the consumer make the ultimate decision, small government, and a disavowing of these identitarian political games that the left is so in love with. It is their bread and butter, is turning identity groups against one another. So, yeah, that's my story.